Good evening, members. Welcome to this Audit Committee meeting. Can I start, please, with apologies for absence? Are there any apologies?
Apologies received from Councillor Greensmith.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll move on to item 2, to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 9th of September 2023. I'm happy to move them as a correct and accurate record from the chair. Is everyone else, have I got a seconder? Councillor Strong? Yep. So all those happy to accept the minutes? Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 3, any declarations of interest from members? None. Thank you. So we'll move on to item 4, the internal audit progress report, and I believe our auditors, Max or Gurpreet, are going to lead on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be leading on the progress report, and I'll pass over to Gurpreet for our follow-up report. So if I can move to page 14 to start with, this shows a graphic table of the progress of our 23-24 plan. So you'll see the 4 reviews have been completed. There's also 2.
Could you move your mic a bit?
Sorry, yeah,
please?
of course. Yeah. I might move slightly closer to it actually, because it won't stretch too far. Is that better?
Sorry, can I just interrupt? It's not just you or anyone aimed at anyone, but it has been raised with me by a member regarding just in general in terms of the meetings that we try and speak as close to the mic as possible. Obviously, that's been picked up. But if any members as well, if you can try and make sure you're speaking into the mic so that everyone can hear, that would be great. Thank you very much. Carry on.
Thank you. So yes, we've got 4 reviews completed. There's 2 that are currently in their field work phase. So that work is ongoing over the last few weeks and will come to the next committee. And there's 3 reports that are due to start the field work in Q4, 2 of which are finance. And because of all the work around the budgets going on, it was agreed that would start in Q4. So moving on to the next few pages, these are our executive summaries of the 3 reports that we're presenting to this committee. So I'll start on the safeguarding report, which starts on page 15 of your packs. We have actually got the full report from page 35 in your packs, but I'll concentrate on the page 15 as the executive summary. So this is a report we've provided limited assurance over both the control design and control effectiveness. And that's principally driven by the 2 high findings. So one around the level of training compliance and mandatory safeguarding training modules, and 2 on the non-completion of the Section 11 assessment, which was due to be completed in May. Having said that, I understand it's been subsequently completed since this review took place. So it's probably important to stress when presenting this report that as a Tier 2 authority, the council hasn't got the same levels of responsibilities around safeguarding that a Tier 1 county council would have. So our review really sort of focused on the safeguarding policies, training, cooperation with other authorities through those networks, and then also stuff around DBS checks for staff, enhanced DBS checks where appropriate. So building on that, there were 2 medium findings raised as well. So one around the DBS checks not being renewed periodically. So staff are subject to DBS checks where appropriate at the recruitment phase, but then not subsequently years later. And say staff may have been in employment for quite a while, which was the case in a few of the examples in finding 3. And then finally, the council's attendance at the NSAB, which is the Nottinghamshire Safeguarding Adults Board, and the potential impact around communication, which I guess is kind of evident through the Section 11 assessment not being completed back into the council and those key officers there. So I'll continue through to the other reports and open up to questions at the end, if that's okay. So moving on to the project and programme management review. So we've provided substantial assurance over the control design, moderate over control effectiveness. Actually, this is an improvement on the previous review in 2021 when it was moderate on both. So there's a positive direction of travel there. This review looked at a sample of Tier 1 and Tier 2 projects, so Tier 1 being the sort of highest risk, highest reputational impact, also highest value usually, and then Tier 2 second, and Tier 3 we excluded from this review because they're more business as usual projects. And it principally looked at the governance arrangements, oversight, and the project and programme management of the delivery. So there were the two findings here, one medium, one low. So the medium finding we raised was around the infrequent highlight reports being issued to the programmer board, which no longer exist now. Reports go to the corporate management team. But for the Arnold Marketplace project, there were infrequent highlight reports through to that group, albeit, again, I understand that the project has sort of fully been delivered now. And then secondly, the low finding we raised around the updating of guidance, which hasn't been updated formally since 2017, albeit, again, the actual principles outlined in the guidance was still reasonable, broadly similar to processes, but didn't reflect some changes, such as the programme board no longer existing. And then finally, moving on to the health and safety report, which is our third report in the pack, where, again, we provided moderate opinion over both control design and effectiveness, with 3 mediums and 2 low findings. So the scope of this review was to look at the council's health and safety arrangements across the services it provides, risk assessments within its service areas, and the management of its council-owned properties. So things like inspections, for example. So I'll probably focus on the 3 medium findings, if that's okay. So the first one being around the completion of risk assessments in some service areas. So the council's AssessNet system is what is used to complete the risk assessments. Some key services hadn't completed those, and on some occasions where they were completed, they were reasonably vague around some of those key risks and controls, and so we'd probably expect some of those to be strengthened going forward. The contractor list, which the council maintained centrally, wasn't kept up to date, and this draws on what core competencies contractors have around health and safety, again, focusing on those ones that are probably more critical. So our recommendation here draws on the fact that keeping that up to date, having a centralised oversight of it to ensure that there's effective control over what contractors' health and safety arrangements are. And then finally, again, coming back to risk assessments, there's not been formal training to service managers on risk assessment since 2019. Again, having said that, there are training modules within the AssessNet system that staff can complete, and there are also forums, such as the Corporate Health and Safety Group, where heads of service are in attendance and do get updates on those key areas. So I'll pause there and invite any questions on any of those 3 reports I've just summarised.
Councillor Creamer first.
Yeah, just quickly on the health and safety and risk assessment of parks and open spaces. Understand it and all the rest, but at the moment as well, we have more friends groups taking over issues with certain aspects of parks and areas. And there's no mention of friends groups and how we actually relate to them with auditing, etc. And responsibilities either.
So we have a separate, sorry, Melvin Carrara, I'm the Head of Environment. We have a separate policy for our Friends of groups, which probably wasn't picked up in the audit, with separate documentation for them. They're established under their own constitutions, they prepare their own risk assessments, so they are ancillary to Gedling Borough Council ones, albeit if they're operating outside on the weekend with, say, a tool like a backpack blower or a strimmer, we will support them in that process. So we put a ranger in place with them, but they'll prepare their own risk assessments to that effect.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. Just, excuse me, coming back to the safeguarding, I mean, albeit the fact that we're a Tier 2 authority and have lower safeguarding responsibilities, I still think it's a little concerning that so many issues have been identified, particularly in the lack of checks and how long some DBS certificates have been going, as it were, between checks, and the fact that one appeared even to be missing. So I'm quite, what I am slightly reassured by is the fact that from the targets dates for the management's response to these various things, it's clear that it is being taken urgently. So I was just wondering, when will this next be reviewed so we know that these issues, which I think are quite important, have been addressed?
So in terms of the specific recommendations raised within this report, BDO follow up on those as they fall due. Gertrude, in a minute, will be talking through our follow-up process as well, which works directly with management to say this was the recommendation that was agreed in the safeguarding report. Can we see what progress has been made and what evidence can demonstrate that? So that's the follow-up process on these specific recommendations. More broadly, we develop our internal audit plan, which is currently going on in terms of working with management to develop the plan going forward. So these are certainly conversations we can have around whether safeguarding is incorporated into that. Having said that, obviously there's a range of other areas for internal audit to look at as well.
Which just, if I can just come back on that one. So you say the reviews will be done as they fall due. Will that then be reported back to the next appropriate committee?
That's right, yeah. So our follow-up report, which you'll see just after the progress report, will be reported back to the committee, and that will summarise whether it's complete, whether recommendations haven't been completed as they fall due, and we've revised the due date with the agreement of management. And then subsequently, if they're overdue, if we've had to change them more than twice, that would be reported as overdue. So particularly for the high recommendations, obviously we'll express the importance of those being implemented in line with the dates agreed, which I think we received quite positive management responses to this report with good detail, which obviously supports that process.
And Councillor Strong.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd just like to compliment the officers on the changes that are evident in the report. What I wanted to say has already been mentioned by Councillors Creamer and Hughes, but in addition, I'm a little bit concerned about the take-up of training and the lack of, let's say, up-to-date reporting on DBS certification. Could not, without trying to overload managerial staff with checking these, could not a system of automatic diary alerts be introduced so that members of staff automatically get reminded that their certification is out of date or they are due for more training? That's one issue, to keep up to date with that. On another thing, going back to the Parks and Street Care, at the bottom of page 25, it mentions where risk levels are higher, sometimes have paper risk assessments. If there's a higher risk, is a paper risk assessment really suitable? I'd be interested to know as a health and safety person in the past. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. I'll take those 2 points separately, if that's okay. So if I start on the certification of training for the mandatory training modules. So I believe that the training modules are provided by the County Council, which the Council access. So I'm sure that there's an opportunity to investigate and liaise with the county to see if there are opportunities for automatic reminders to be sent. And that would certainly, hopefully, bring that uptake in completion higher. To remind staff that it's due to be completed. So that's something that I would possibly suggest is investigated with the county as in line with our recommendation. And then just to address the second point around paper risk assessments. So obviously AssessNet is the system the council have introduced as an electronic risk assessment portal. I think broadly across the sector we tend to see most things moving electronically nowadays, and that is certainly the trend overall. So, yeah, as a control, I would say electronic probably supports that sort of business continuity planning, communication perspective better. But I suppose I would probably urge management to decide how they would have it to ensure consistency in how those risk assessments are held.
Thank you. I think around the safeguarding, I also raised some issues around the areas that have been highlighted, and I did have a meeting with Fran and just sort of raised some areas of concern, but I am more assured now when I look at the management response. But I also understand that there have been other actions taken already, as has already been alluded to resolve some of this. Fran, could I bring you in? Is that okay? Because I know you might add more to add to that. Thank you.
I think there's a few points I'd like to make which cover this audit and other comments mentioned by Councillor Hughes. So part of the process of ensuring that these audit actions carried out is through performance management. So we have it's called Pentana. It's referred to several times in these reports. It's our performance management system. It now has on it all outstanding audit actions, and managers are required to update those, and they are checked by SLT so that we can ensure that those actions are being fulfilled and that they are being carried out in a timely manner. And if there is any reason why they can't be, that reason is explained, and potentially, if appropriate, the timelines are moved or not, if it's not appropriate. So just to sort of highlight that it is also addressed through performance management as well. In terms of the safeguarding training, again, CMT have been doing a piece of work recently to look at mandatory training across the council. So it would cover safeguarding, equalities, health and safety. So what training do we feel at a management level is absolutely essential for all our staff to undertake? And then making sure that message is clear to them, tracking the rates of take-up for that, and potentially where training is not completed and it has been requested repeatedly, that there is formal action taken in relation to that. So I think it's a piece of work we have been doing recently to try and really be clear around what our expectations are in terms of completion of that training. So we've created a matrix which says what the mandatory training is, links to it if it's an online training, or how it will be provided if it's not online, and what the expectation is for the time frame of completion, just to make absolutely sure that we are, again, performance management is more effective in terms of training.
Thank you for that. Are there any other comments or questions from members? Councillor Hunt.
I would just like to say there's been a staggering amount of work gone into this particular report since I've started sitting on this committee. This particular report, it's just, I'm astonished at how much work you've done. So it's just really to say well done and thank you for that. I think given that one job has been vacant for a very long time, there's been an awful lot to pick up as a result of that, and another job is shared. Well, one lady's doing two jobs. I think you've done remarkably well, also given the limited resources and capacity that that afflict us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So in terms of agenda item 4, are members happy to accept the recommendations there on the page? Can I have a show of hands? Yeah. Okay, thank you. So we'll move on now to agenda item 5, and that, I believe, is going to be led by Gurpreet. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So this paper is the follow-up. I should just add on the previous paper, on the progress report that Max presented, there is a sector update at the back. It provides a bit of a summary on some of the key areas from the autumn statement. There is a link through to there to the BDO website, which gives a summary on some of the key changes that were announced at that point as well. And so it's worth a look separately. So if anyone has any questions around the sector update, feel free. I think there are obviously changes in the pipeline around planning. Obviously, there's the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act, which became an act on the 26th of October, and some other changes around devolution, obviously not necessarily affecting Gedling directly, but what's happening wider in the sector, and also a reference to Offlog, the Office for Local Government, newly established in July, and whose role is still evolving at the moment and may become more and more important. And so we talk about those areas. So obviously, have a look at the sector update if there's any questions. On the follow-up in particular, and I think Fran's picked up on some of this already, so I want to just start off with a bit of a summary first in terms of where we've come from and then where we are today. So where we are today is a significant amount more positive from where we have been previously, and that is due to Fran and others in terms of the engagement that we've had to try and improve follow-up. So there's been conversations here already around how do we follow up our reports, and it's significantly important. If we do a review but don't follow it up, well then something may not change unless we go back and kind of nag and knock and say, well, where are we up to on this? And so it's a really vital part of the process. Otherwise, the reports you've just heard about are pieces of paper and nothing happens. The follow-up then keeps that pressure, if you like, in a healthy way to make sure we turn these into being implemented. And so what has changed from before, where we had high levels of non-compliance, where follow-up actions were not being done for a variety of reasons, it's now gone on to the Pentana software, as mentioned. We've attended a CMT meeting in October. There's been lots of engagement with heads of service to set out expectations and what's required. And effectively, all of these go onto the software. Management have the ability to then respond to these, and then we will go in and validate the evidence against those responses. And that change, with a lot of kind of energy behind it, has significantly improved the position in terms of completion rates and what we're seeing. Still not at a perfect stage, there's more to go, but to put it into statistics, we've previously reported to this committee 80% or so not replying to our responses and non-compliance with the dates that have been set. What we see in this particular one, of the 57 recommendations, we're pleased to say 32 are now deemed complete, which is 56%, whereas before that was around 20%. So almost a 300% increase in terms of completion. And a significant improvement, and that's down to the engagement areas that I've mentioned and Fran mentioned earlier. So I want to really make sure we get across that message. We will obviously continue with this and hopefully see more improvement in terms of responses, but for our annual opinion, which I'll be writing kind of from April, this is a significant piece of what impacts our annual opinion on the council's control environment. And what I'm seeing here is really positive. We want to see that continue and hopefully continue through to April to positively impact the opinion come that point as well. I don't think there's anything else particular on the follow-up I want to mention in terms of process. Obviously, you'll see the individual actions there, those which are complete, and then they're followed by those that are in progress and overdue, as Max defined earlier. If there's any specific questions on those, please let me know. But from my point of view, I want to report that we're pleased with the amount of progress that has been made in terms of engagement with management and others to improve follow-up.
Thank you so much, Gurpreet. That's really good news, and we're just really pleased with the progress that's been made. And I echo the comments that Councillor Hunt's made as well. There's been a lot of work that's gone into this, despite the challenges, with staffing and with finances and things. So it does make a real big difference. Are there any comments or questions from members on this particular item? No, there's nothing to add. Okay, so I'm going to ask the members, are they happy to accept the recommendations on agenda item 5? Yeah. Thank you. All in favour? Thank you. So we'll move on then. Thank you for that, Gurpreet. We'll move on to item 6, the Corporate Risk Management Scorecard Quarter 2, 23-24. And I believe, Fran, you're going to lead on this. Thank you.
It's a bit of a double act. So Tina's covering the finance risks and I'm covering everything else. Yeah. So, so members are familiar with this report and format. So this is the update to the Corporate Risk Register for Quarter 2. It's noted in the cover report that we are currently undertaking a review of our risk management strategy and framework, and I'm hoping to present a draft of that to SLT this week for their first consideration. So it should be coming through to Audit Committee early next year for your consideration. So quite a big piece of work, and it will be quite a shift in the way we assess risk. And also, again, I've mentioned Pentana a couple of times, but there is a risk management module on Pentana that we are hoping to utilise to, again, make the process much more straightforward for officers. It's currently done separately on an Excel spreadsheet, and what we're trying to do is bring all those processes together in one place, so it's much easier for managers to make sure that those risks are regularly updated and assessed. Turning to the scorecard itself for Quarter 2, and I'll hand you over to Tina for the first 2 risks.
Sorry, I'll have to move up here a bit. Okay, so the first risk is about failure to prevent the budget overheating once the budget's been set. This is very much an in-year risk, so this one can fluctuate throughout the year. At Quarter 1 and Quarter 2, it has stayed quite static this year with a quite low negligible risk at B1. This is because at Quarter 1 we was predicting a balanced budget at outturn, and at Quarter 2 we was predicting an underspend. not saying that that won't change. We do have some significant overspends that we've been seeing in some areas across the authority. We have been able to mitigate those over the first 2 quarters with lots of additional investment income that we've had coming in to give us either a balanced view or that underspend that we're currently predicting. But through Q3, when we get to the end of December, we might see a different result there, and heading into outturn, that underspend might go. We just don't know yet. There's still quite a lot of volatile things in the budgets, including still quite high inflation, high staff costs, lots of agency costs coming through, things like that. So whilst at the moment we're saying it's quite low risk, that could change. Okay. Does anybody have any questions on that one before I move to the second one? No. Okay. So the second one is more of a long-term risk, and this is about the failure to maintain financial integrity. What we're saying is currently this risk is quite high. It's basically because there's a number of issues within the budget, particularly around the medium-term financial plan, which is our 5-year outlook of a balanced budget. We have significant efficiencies that we need to meet to enable us to meet a balanced budget over the 5 years. Also, in addition to that, we have some issues around kind of like procurement and contract management, our internal charging strategy, and making sure that our fees and charges operate at full cost recovery, and also some audit work that we have outstanding that's nearing completion around our financial systems, and that's all around the fraud case. So actions that we've currently been undertaken is the efficiency programme. We are meeting with portfolio holders in January to set out a list of proposed efficiencies for 24-25. So if they're agreed, that will kind of like smooth the 24-25 year out, and then we'll bring further efficiencies forward for the following years. And we're also looking to develop a procurement and contract management strategy that will make sure that we are driving best value through all our procurement contracts. Our charging strategy, that's basically around, like I said, making sure that we meet full cost recovery, and also how we can maximise our current levels of income, but also whether we can identify any new streams of income coming forward. And the internal audit, which BDO has been undertaken, the final report has just actually come in today. There's been a little bit of back and forth on that one. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but we're hoping that that will identify those those issues in the financial system that we can finally address and move forward on that. So the risk does remain quite high because of all of those things, but again, it is more of a long-term view. Thank you.
Just a comment rather than a question on that. I don't think it'll ever go down to green while we've actually got yearly settlements, which is not actually helpful and actually long-term planning. So the best of luck. I'm pretty sure we will get it down to amber, but I don't think we'll ever see it go green until we get actually proper settlements from the government.
Yeah, actually, we should receive our settlement next week, so we will have that will give us a little more certainty. I'm not banking on a multi-year settlement, but you never know. So yeah, it is what it is really. I'm hoping that it will come down over the course of the next 12 months, but at the moment we just have to wait and see.
Thank you. In terms of the remainder of the risks, I won't go through every line of the report, but just sort of highlight some of them as I go through. So in terms of the risk number 3, which is failure to protect staff, including health and safety issues, the risk level remains the same as Q1. As you can see, the risk level actually increased last year, so it went from a B3 to C3 last year. We were hoping that that was going to be coming down, and we're still hopeful that towards the end of this year that might do so. As you can appreciate, we had a new health and safety team brought in, and Rebecca's sitting, our health and safety and emergency planning manager, sitting in the meeting tonight. As inspections are underway, and there is a regular pattern of inspection now, which is really, really positive. More and more things become uncovered. But in terms of the work that Rebecca's undertaking and some of the positives that have come out of the audit, I'm hopeful that those risks level will start to reduce. In terms of risk number 4, so that's failure to recruit and retain staff and maintain internal capacity. So this risk level, again, remains the same. And it's remained at this level for some time now, and it's identified again within the report. There are still some issues around recruitment, particularly for certain types of jobs around planning, environmental health and finance. So we are taking action in relation to that. There have been meetings between HR and communications to look at the recruitment page and individual recruitment campaigns and see if they can be more targeted or dealt with in a slightly different way. Some departments have done things slightly differently. So, for example, in legal, we've had a successful recruitment campaign recently through offering a slightly different structure arrangement, so a career progression through the service, which has proved quite attractive for sort of newer people coming into the profession. But there is ongoing work with that. And again, at corporate management team, we have been trying to share between managers different experiences we've had and ideas that might help that we can use in different departments to try and recruit and really retain those staff.
At that stage, any members got any questions or comments? No?
As you can see, there are a number of ongoing actions in relation to that area as well. The next risk is failure to properly utilise existing ICT, react to technology changes and prevent data loss. So again, no change in that risk level. That sits at risk number 3. Members may be aware that we did have a baseline review done of our ICT services, and we have now recruited an external consultant, and they started towards the end of Q2, early Q3. The consultant is called Change Network, and they are working to prepare an ICT digital strategy for the council, which does address issues such as data risk and control of data as well within it. So that's a really important piece of work, not only for data security, but also for improving ICT provision across the council. It's at the moment, the timeframe is that piece of work should be completed in January, so we will hopefully have a new digital strategy and framework as to how the council is going to operate going forward. So a really positive piece of work there. Also, the information security policy was reviewed and approved by Cabinet, so that has now been updated, which is another positive piece of work, and again, an action from audit that needed completing. Is there any questions on that particular risk? No? So risk 6 and 7 are 2 risks that have increased in Q2. And forgive me, I've just noticed that in the pack there's actually an error. So on both those risks, it says significant likelihood and serious impact. It should say major impact for both those. It just hasn't been updated in line with the score being increased. So firstly, in relation to risk number 6, which is failure to protect and utilise physical assets, there has been a slight increase in the risk level here from C3 to C4. The reason of this increase is due to some issues in relation to our leisure centres. So whilst these aren't necessarily assets that we own all of them, some of them are joint use sites. Obviously, we do provide leisure services from those facilities. So if there are any issues in relation to those assets, that does impact on the council's ability to perform those functions. There has been some maintenance issues with Carlton Forum Leisure Centre, which has caused this to escalate this particular risk, but we are working closely with the County Council to rectify that, and we're expecting some works to the centre next year. So that risk is being mitigated, but it has, as I say, increased the risk in the last quarter, but we're hoping that will come down. Are there any questions on that? In relation to risk number 7, this is failure to react to changes in legislation. Again, this is an increase in the risk level in Q2, and it has increased from C3 to D3, so is now, is now at a red risk level. The reason for this increase is actually quite specific. So there has been some new regulations introduced which require our building control officers to have a specific qualification, and which they have to have achieved by the 1st of April next year in order for us to effectively carry out that business building control function moving forward. So there is a risk increase around that in so much as although that they are being supported through that qualification process, we may essentially end up in a situation where we potentially lose some officers either because they don't wish to complete the qualification or they're not successful in completing it. But we are putting all the steps in place to try and mitigate that by providing them with the support to get through that qualification. So that is a new requirement, but it is likely to have an impact specifically on that service and the council's ability to perform that building control function if there aren't the staff able to do so. Are there any questions? Oh, yep.
So just a question on the legislation. I'm assuming there's time to actually get the training and it in. Will this be a yearly requirement or is it a one-off requirement for the actual particular certificate? I
don't actually know how regularly that would need to be reviewed, so I don't know if it is once you've achieved it, that's it, or you have to renew it. I can find out from Mike Avery and update committee on that outside the meeting.
Yeah, thank you, because that would be a financial implication itself. But
Councillor Hughes first.
Thank you. Just following on from that, you mentioned that there was a danger that some of the building control officers didn't achieve their certification. Given that, as I recall, this is one of the areas where there is difficulty obtaining staff, is there a danger that some of our staff who complete their certificate will then get poached by other councils?
Yes. Yeah.
Councillor Strong.
Well, my question was related to that, Councillor Hughes. I just wondered, you said that there might be problems completing this qualification. Is there anything specific that would cause a problem in doing it? Is it time or finance?
No, not that I'm aware of. It's down to the individual officers, I suppose, and you know, there may be officers who decide that they just don't actually want to go, you know, it's a choice for them, isn't it? But as far as I'm aware at the moment, that is progressing and we're doing everything we can to support them through this. But yes, that all these questions are absolutely valid points that you're raising and why the risk has been escalated. So, you know, particularly in terms of retaining those people as well, and then recruiting going forward. So support being offered at the moment, there's probably further work to do around this to mitigate the risk further. And we should know later on in the financial year where how those qualifications are looking and whether the risk can be reduced.
Thank you. Councillor Sandra Barnes.
Thank you very much. Can I just ask about, it says actions outstanding, you know, about the free weekly food waste collection? Are we anywhere nearer doing anything about that?
I don't know if Mel can actually answer that as he happens to be in the meeting.
I can respond to that one. It's a Nottinghamshire-wide responsibility because Nottinghamshire County Council are the lead waste authority. And Nottinghamshire-wide, it has been decided that the food waste service will be delivered from October 2027 onwards. So obviously we will be starting to prepare for that as we move forward in terms of vehicles, bins, food caddies and the necessary requirements to deliver that new service that we don't currently deliver. But there are plans in place to deliver that.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Can I just ask as well, Tina, I know that in terms of the actions outstanding on item 7, when we had a discussion previous, you just gave me a little bit of information around the funding, that potentially what that could look like. Would you be okay to just outline that to the committee?
Yeah, so the government have announced that we will be receiving some capital funding this current financial year for waste and some revenue funding for 24-25. As far as I'm aware, we haven't got any details of that yet. So what we don't know is kind of like what the capital funding is to be used for, whether it's for vehicles or whether it's for kind of like depot configuration, and we're just waiting for that confirmation. Mel, I don't know if you've got any more details on the announcement of the funding. I think it's only just come through.
It has, yeah. As far as I understand, some of the capital is towards the vehicles, but you're right to say it's still being decided at the granular level.
I think the million-dollar question was whether we were going to get enough from the government to actually do everything that they want us to do, but we'll wait and see. Fran, do you want to carry on?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So moving on to risk number 8, failure of contractors or partnership arrangements and contractual breaches. So this risk level, again, remains the same. In terms of actions completed during Q2, Tina and I have been working on some of the, again, audit recommendations around the contract management audit to try and improve processes around contract management. Again, we're looking at some software to try and assist with that, and we've been in conversations with the provider to deliver some training to officers as to how they can use that so we can be better in terms of our contract management processes. There are some actions outstanding, as you can see, in relation to contracts, in particularly implementing the new contract register and contract management module. As well, I think it's important for members to note that the Procurement Act was given royal assent in October, and this has some quite big implications for the procurement processes here at the Council, our contract and procurement rules, and our currently being developed procurement strategy. So again, that does need to be taken into account when we're making, changes to these processes and systems. Are there any questions on that one? No. Okay. Risk number 9, inability to defend one-off challenges to a council decision on new compensation trend emerges. This, again, risk level remains the same. No particular significant actions to report, except that there has been a restructure of legal services and full recruitment, which means that we have got a full legal team now, which is really positive and hasn't been the case for some time. So that's really good news in terms of providing that appropriate legal advice to the council, which will support in the ability to defend any challenges.
Councillor Creamer, question?
Yeah, just a very general question. Have there actually been many challenges recently?
Has there been many? No. In terms of specific details, I don't want to misquote because I don't know them all off the top of my head. There have been some claims. In terms of insurance updates, I don't have numbers in that regard. But I suppose the biggest one recently was the potential challenge around fee setting for taxi licensing, which was dealt with and you were made aware of last year, and the compensation that was paid out because of that. But I don't touch. Thank you. Okay, so risk number 10, failure to maintain service standards, customer satisfaction and or meet customer expectations. That risk still remains happily low at B1. And again, some really positive work from customer services in Q2. They launched the Outreach Centre in Bestwood, which is proving successful. SLT are continuing to monitor complaints in terms of number and identify trends coming out from that. In addition as well, as part of our equalities work, we're looking at equality-based complaints now as well to seeing, is there a particular link to trends in that type of complaint where we might have issues we need to improve in terms of our customer service. So that's the work in relation to that risk. I don't know if anyone has any specific questions on that. No. And risk 11, failure to prevent damage to the council's reputation. So again, no change in that risk level. That remains at B2. Actions completed during Q2. We have a number of actions that across various strategies, including our carbon management strategy, our equalities framework, and it's just making sure, as we talked about earlier, that the performance of those is well managed so that we can achieve what we say we are going to achieve, and when we can't, highlight that to the appropriate committee and in the appropriate forum through the right processes. Are there any particular questions on that? No. Moving on to risk number 12, so failure to react to an environmental incident or malicious act. So again, similar to the health and safety one, this risk level actually increased last year. And we were hoping through the work of the business continuity plan review and emergency plan review that this would be able to come down. Unfortunately, we have found that capacity around this area of work has been a real challenge. So as I think committee were aware, we had tried to seek some support from the County Council in terms of some resource to support with the review of our emergency plan and business continuity plans. There's been some really positive work, so business continuity plans have now been prepared by all service areas. But we still need to complete a review of our emergency plan and a corporate business continuity plan. Of course, not assisted by actual environmental incidents. So obviously, recently we had to deal with the response and recovery, and continuing to deal with the recovery from Storm Babette. And again, just so committee aware, I suppose the impact on departments and staff when those incidents arise, I think the response was good, and the recovery work has been outstanding. The speed with which the grants were made available to businesses and residents following Storm Babette. But again, it takes a lot of resource. So in terms of those timescales for reviewing those plans, they've been put back from December to March to the end of the year, and we are now currently looking at getting some support from elsewhere just to really get those plans over the line so that they are completed in time for 24-25.
Councillor Creamer.
Me again, sorry about this. Yeah, just to say, I don't think you undersold it to as good. I think the actual staff from top to bottom, managers to people on the ground, actually were excellently doing the staff a bit. So I think we actually extend our thanks to them for their hard work. And it was above and beyond from all levels.
And continues to be challenging with snow and rain, and even over this weekend we've had Mel and Rebecca both know, because Rebecca's been on calls this weekend, we've had the pump deployed at Colic, so it's ongoing.
Councillor Strong.
I can only echo what Councillor Creamer said, but I'm also intrigued by the watching brief on the requirements of Martin's Law. Is anything actually happening on that?
I'll hand you over to Rebecca for that, if that's okay.
Hello. Excuse me. So Martin's Law was due to go before Parliament to be passed as a bill, but they've had some feedback following the public consultation, and they are trying to provide more detailed guidance for standard tiers to make the duties on venue owners less onerous. So we're just sort of waiting for that detail. Once they've refined that detail, then they'll be looking for it to get passed in the House of Commons and receive royal assent. But we're not at that point yet. We've not got a date or anything like that.
And then finally, risk number 13. Again, there's no change in that in that level, so that's failure to react to socio-economic trends. Excuse me. In terms of actions in quarter two, well, as you can see, the Gedling plan was actually approved at full council on the 2nd of March, but what we have started in quarter two is our service planning for next year, so looking at those plans and priorities based on updated SWOT data, equalities data, various data sources to deliver our service plans for next year, 24-25, to meet those Gedling plan priorities.
Any other comments or questions before we end that item? No? Okay, our members then, I'll move the recommendations that we just note the progress of the report. Have I got a seconder for that? Yeah, Alison Hunt. Are we all happy to accept that then? Thank you very much, members. So I haven't received any other item which I would consider urgent. I just wanted to, obviously this is the last meeting before the new year, just wanted to thank all the officers of the committee for the work that they've done throughout the year, and thank the members as well for the work that they've done to scrutinise some of these reports. Also, thank you to Mel Cryer and Rebecca Hutchinson for coming along this evening, and also our auditors, Max and Gurpreet. And I just hope you all have a nice Christmas and a happy New Year. And that's the meeting closed. Thank you very much.